Então, nós estamos aqui com o Steve para falar de novo sobre esse tema que está aqui escrito no Cannabis Manifesto, livro de lançamento inédito no Brasil agora, pela primeira vez em português, pode ser adquirido através de distribuidores oficiais, também a Sou Cannabis. Esse livro é muito importante porque ele traz reflexões de uma pessoa que esteve imbricada desde o começo no processo de legalização da cannabis dos últimos tempos nos Estados Unidos e na Califórnia, e tem muita coisa para contar para a gente, como, por exemplo, o uso medicinal, né? Steve, there's a chapter in the book that says that cannabis has always been a medicine. It's something really curious. People are just hearing about it now, and they think it's just this new thing that's coming along, and then there's a lot of technology involved into that, and then there's all these new studies into the research and discovery of these new molecules such as cannabinoids. I'd like you to tell us a little bit about that statement. Cannabis has always been a medicine.
Well, it is true that modern science is now helping us unlock the full therapeutic potential of the cannabis plant. But this plant has been part of human medicine since there's been such a thing as medicine. You can go back to the very first medical textbook that was written by human beings, the Pen Cao Cheng, a Chinese medical text, again, many thousands of years old. And it records even pre-existing oral traditions from many years before that. And cannabis is recommended in the Peng Cao Cheng for a very wide range of applications, many of the same things that you find it being recommended for today. And if you take a look at other ancient systems of medicine, the Ayurvedic system of medicine, the Egyptian system of medicine, Greek medicine, all of these ancient schools of medicine used cannabis, again, for a very wide range of applications, everything from cancer, from tumors, to what we today call Alzheimer's, to chronic pain, to childbirth issues, to insomnia. The list goes on. And so there's this very long list. You can look in Persian medicine, you find the same thing. In the 1770s, cannabis medicine moved from the Ayurvedic school in India, and it was taken by the English into their medical system. And cannabis became a very important medicine. It was the most widely prescribed medicine for many decades in England and in the United States. And that continued up until around 1900. Cannabis as a medicine began to fall into disuse around 1900 for two reasons. One, as society became more industrialized, as people lost a more intimate connection with plants and understanding of them, the knowledge about how to properly dose and administer cannabis was lost. And you had big companies that were buying batches of cannabis in the days before you could analyze them. And because cannabis is a very complex plant, there can be significant variations in the chemical composition between one batch of cannabis and another. So in the days before modern analytics, but after we lost our intimate personal connection with plants, there was this period of time where people basically forgot how to use cannabis. And so sometimes cannabis medicines would be very effective. Sometimes they wouldn't be effective at all. Sometimes they would not be very potent. Sometimes they were very potent. So there's an issue with predictability. And the other issue was the invention of the hypodermic syringe. So the hypodermic syringe was invented around 1900. And it was useful for a lot of ways in medicine, but it was not very good for cannabis because cannabis does not dissolve in water, and medicines that do not dissolve in water cannot be used in hypodermic syringes. So as hypodermic syringes became more and more adopted, as more and more pharmaceutical substances were created, cannabis fell into disuse, and then of course was completely just prohibited in 1938. So in the United States, in any case. Today, when people talk about all the new science and the new uses, what's happened is that problem of unpredictability of the batches of cannabis has been solved. Because now we just do an analytical test. We understand, is this a variety of cannabis that's rich in THC, or is it rich in CBD? Or does it have an equal balance of the two? We can understand whether that cannabis is rich in a terpene like myrcene, which tends to give the cannabis a more sedative effect, or whether it's more rich in limonene, which tends to give it a more stimulating, joyous kind of effect. We can dial these things in now with modern analytics. But cannabis has always been a medicine. It's just that, you know, we human beings usually get better with things over time, and we're getting better with cannabis.
So two different schools of approaches. One, a pharmaceutical, monomolecule, standardized, and another more handmade, personal use. What are the difference of using monomolecules and whole plant for treatment of medicinal issues?
So the traditional pharmaceutical model of medicines is to exclusively use monomolecules. So various different substances are found. They could be minerals, they could be plants, various different kinds of things. And they're broken down into individual molecules. Typically in the pharmaceutical world, those molecules are then reproduced with synthetic methods. A lot of people, myself included, believe that the whole idea of monomolecule medicine is flawed. That when you put together medicines that are composed of monomolecules, that they tend to be less effective, and they tend to have more side effects than the alternative, which is a whole plant extract. So let's take a look at this as regards cannabis. There's two ways you can make cannabis medicines. You can take the whole plant, and a cannabis plant has, you know, up to, well, the cannabis plant, there's 140 different individual unique chemical compounds called cannabinoids that can be found in the cannabis plant. And literally thousands of other compounds that could be found in the plant called terpenes, which are the chemical compounds that give everything in our world odor and flavor. Both of these compounds, cannabinoids and terpenes, have unique effects on the human body, different effects depending on which cannabinoids and which terpenes are present in any given sample of cannabis. And so, in fact, the range of subjective effects and therapeutic effects that you can experience with cannabis are very, very wide, because there are all of these different potential compounds that can come in it. In a whole plant extract, typically you'll have 50 or 60 different individual chemical compounds in various different quantities. And they balance each other out and synergize with each other in some very, very powerful ways. So to give you an example, when we were giving a monomolecule CBD preparation to epileptic children, it was only about 1/3 as effective in terms of reduction of symptoms and the length of efficacy, the period of time that it was effective, as a whole plant preparation, right? And different combinations of cannabinoids and terpenes can be more effective or less effective. So when we took a whole plant extract, that basically had no THC in it, that was only CBD, was rich in CBD. It was effective, but when we combined it with 1 part THC to 19 parts CBD, it was twice or 3 times as effective. So what you lose with a monomolecule preparation is this entourage effect, the effect that you get from the combination of different terpenes and different cannabinoids. And it's just more effective medicine. You know, I saw it over the course of 15 years directly treating hundreds of thousands of medical cannabis patients at Harborside, taking a whole plant extract and breaking it down into monomolecule components is like taking a precious piece of ancient porcelain and smashing it against the wall for no reason whatsoever. So there's no question that whole plant medicine is more effective. And here's the thing, whole plant medicine is also significantly less expensive. Just think about it. If you take a plant and you make a simple extract and you take that whole extract out of the plant, you can just put it into a capsule and people can swallow that capsule, and it's very, very inexpensive. But if you follow the pharmaceutical model of breaking cannabis down into all of these various different monomolecules, and then recombining them in various different ways, what you end up with is a very, very expensive process, and also a process that can be patented and that can be controlled by pharmaceutical companies. This plant has been part of human medicine for as long as we've had medicine. You put a seed in the ground, you grow it. You have different seeds, and different strains of cannabis are better or worse for various different types of conditions. That cannabis medicine served us well for 10,000 years. And my belief is that that type of cannabis medicine is the best type of cannabis medicine for 98 or 99% of the people who need cannabis medicine. I think there is a role for advanced pharmaceutical preparations of cannabis in cases where the desired cannabinoid and terpene profile is very, very difficult or impossible to achieve by breeding various different strains of cannabis. And we may find that there's some cases like that. But the default for all of us should be that the most affordable and most effective cannabis medicine is whole plant medicine. Anybody who tries to tell us anything else is just trying to make $1 or $2 or more than that.
It's so intricate. It's so interesting once we find out what's the motivation behind what's happening right now, and then we can act about it. One thing that is left from that debate over the CBD, the pure CBD, or CBD as a medicine, and forgetting all the other components of the plant, including THC, which is kind of like seen as the bad boy of the picture right now in the last, I don't know, last decade or so, when the CBD was pushed forward as the only big thing in the medicinal part of cannabis, is that people did not understand that their consumption in the daily basis could be a medicinal consumption, even so if they were ingesting THC. It's very common nowadays that you say, hey, I got some cannabis here that can help you out, and then treat like offering this THC rich cannabis to people, and then they say, no, I want it for medicinal purposes, or watching out people that are consumers of cannabis but saying that they don't use medicinal cannabis, they use recreational cannabis, which is a new debate that's come along. And in Brazil, it's very hot right now because a lot of people that are activists and they're pushing the cannabis forward see as the medicinal argument in a way that they can like push this forward. But then there's this like misled and misinformation about what cannabis can really do in a medicinal way to us. And I love your perspective on that take of recreational versus medicinal use of cannabis. Can you tell us a little bit more, in Brazilian public, a little bit more about that debate?
Well, sure. I mean, let's first just observe that while CBD is a useful medicine, it's not that it's not a useful medicine. It's a very powerful anti-inflammatory. It can be very, very powerful for anxiety conditions. In my opinion, it has nowhere near the therapeutic potential of THC, nowhere near the therapeutic potential. If you take a look at the number of people who are suffering from the kinds of medical conditions that are effectively addressed by THC, chronic pain, chronic insomnia, chronic anxiety, cancer, Alzheimer's, some of the most grave diseases facing us today, and then you take a look at the conditions and the number of people suffering from them that are effectively addressed by CBD alone, there's just no comparison. And we also know absolutely beyond a shadow of a doubt that when you combine CBD with THC, it is almost always more effective than when you use CBD alone. So just to set that baseline, one of the things that has happened is that so much propaganda has been put out about cannabis. It's been looked at through a prohibitionist lens for so long that even people who love the plant, even sometimes cannabis activists, misunderstand their own relationship to the plant. And I'll give you an example, and this example is composed of many different encounters I've had. Somebody will come up to me at a conference somewhere and say something like this: Steve, you know, I really support what you're doing. I think that it's so important that people who are sick, who are ill, have access to medical cannabis. And I'm in total agreement with you about that. And, you know, I myself like weed too. In fact, I've been smoking it, you know, for a long time, but I'm not sick. You know, I don't need it medically. It's not like I'm a patient or anything. I'm like, okay, tell me about how you use cannabis. What was your life like before you were using it? And what's it like now? And I'll get something like this. Well, you know, Steve, before I used cannabis, I'd get off work and, you know, I'd feel tired and irritated and irritable, maybe angry. Maybe I had a fight with my boss, or I just didn't get everything done that I wanted to get done that day. I'm feeling frustrated. I get into rush hour traffic on the way home. My back aches. My stomach is sour. I don't feel like, you know, going home and talking to my wife and telling her about what a crappy day that I had, or having to deal with my kids who are going to be demanding attention from me. And so, you know, I get home and I'm feeling kind of irritable. I don't really want to sit down and eat dinner, but I do. And you know, I don't enjoy it that much, but I get through it. And after dinner, I sit down in front of the TV and I try to relax a little bit, but I don't really, and you know, I end up dozing off later on in the evening. My stomach's kind of upset, my back is still hurting, and you know, I'm not really interested in doing anything. I pass out in the chair. I wake up in the middle of the night and I crawl into the bedroom where my wife is feeling neglected and ignored, and she's pissed off. And so I fall asleep and I get up, and the next morning I do it all over again. Okay, how is it with cannabis? Well, with cannabis, it's really different. You know, I get off work at the end of the day, and it doesn't matter what kind of day that I've had. I feel pretty good. I put on my favorite playlist on the way home. You know, it doesn't matter what happened with the boss. I'm feeling okay. My stomach isn't sour. My back isn't hurting me. I'm really looking forward to going home and sharing my day with my wife. When I get there, I'm as happy to spend time and play with my kids as they are to play with me. And dinner, well, dinner always tastes delicious. And I have a great dinner with my family. And then we put the kids to bed, and the wife and I have a little bit of extra special intimate time together because of the cannabis, and we fall asleep in each other's arms. And I wake up the next morning refreshed and ready to have another great day. So think about what would happen if this person went to a doctor and presented with this list of issues. Doc, I get off of work, I'm angry, my stomach's all upset, I don't feel like eating anything, I don't want to hang out with my wife, we don't have sex anymore, I fall asleep in front of the television instead of going in, I don't have a relationship with my kids. Well, the doctor would say, gee, you know, you've got anxiety, you have anger management control issues, you have severe indigestion, you may have more severe digestive issues, Crohn's disease that we need to take a look at. Clearly, you've got insomnia, you've got libido issues. And that person would be given a list of pharmaceutical preparations as long as your arm, right? Well, I don't know how it is in Brazil, but in the United States, every night on TV, they've got these commercials for different pharmaceutical preparations. And at the end of the commercials that, you know, show a beautiful spring day and everything's cheery and everybody's beautiful and happy, they give you this list of side effects, you know, rashes, shivering, sweats, possible stroke, heart attack, and death, right? And the list of side effects is, it's like, you know, like a horror movie or something. And what we know is that cannabis is more effective, it's natural, it's safe for all of these things. So there's just millions of people walking around thinking that they're just getting high, when really what they're doing is they're attending to their wellness in a much healthier way than they would if they went to a doctor and got the standard pharmaceutical treatment.
Okay, so yeah, that's in your book. Choose cannabis for wellness and not intoxication, as tips and a lot of other perspectives that help us to understand our own consumption, that sometimes we're always doing in an automatic way, and then there's this lie that comes up and say, hey, this is more than whatever just parsing, just recreation. This goes way more, and it's so important that we can reflect about this issue and understand our consumption in order as well to work with this plant and work with other people. We know there's a huge universe of people out there that have to be talked about and educated and re-educated about this plant, and it is helping me so much in doing it that I cannot recommend it more para todos vocês que estão aí vendo. Steve escreveu esse livro maravilhoso que ajuda muito as nossas reflexões a respeito de todo o uso recreativo, como usar para não se intoxicar, usar para o bem-estar. Então, recomendo muito que vocês comprem esse livro agora, a primeira vez em português. Fenomenal. I want to thank you so much, Steve. I want to ask you a last question to finish this block. We've been talking about the the medicinal uses of the plant and how can we use it in the environment of use. I wanted to ask you, why did you write this book?
I'll answer that question, but I want to go back to the last question for 1 minute. When we're talking about the various different kinds of effects and how we look at the effects of cannabis, and we've talked about how many of the therapeutic effects of cannabis are misunderstood by some people as just getting high. I want to elaborate on that a little bit, because I think that this plant is just so wonderful in all of the different gifts that she gives to us. So we think about getting high, but really, if we start breaking it down, what we're talking about is things like cannabis has the ability to extend our patience, to spark our creativity, to wake up our sense of play, to bring us in closer contact with nature, to teach us how to resolve conflicts more peacefully, to open our hearts to being more tolerant and to building more inclusive societies, the way that cannabis can help a poet find just the right word, or a musician find just the right note, or a painter mix just the right color, or the exact precise brushstroke that works. You know, these are incredible, incredible things. The way that cannabis can turn a walk through a park into a spiritual experience, or can turn an argument into a reasonable conversation. In our world today, where there's so much violence, where there's so much intolerance, where there's just so much people being mean to each other instead of being kind and gentle and nice to each other, this plant is a tremendous, tremendous gift to us in so many different ways. Mother Nature has been incredibly kind and wise and generous when she gave it to us. It's here for us now, and all we have to do is open our hearts and learn the lessons that she has to teach us.
That's nice lesson right there. A lot of good lessons to be learned, especially when we have somebody like you writing all of this stuff that you lived throughout your life, and that you had time to reflect upon it, and then you had all these lectures and all these experiences translated into a single piece of book, which is, I'm astonished by your ability to so much different matters into one line, into one timeline, and that's cannabis, right? So I wanted to ask you, what was your motivation in writing this book? Why did you write this book?
I wrote the book for two main reasons. One was to empower activists to be able to make the most effective argument about cannabis. And two, to be able to bring people who were either not sure about cannabis or actually opposed to cannabis over onto our side. And so I tried to write the book in a way that I never made any kind of, tried to hide the fact that I was an advocate for the plant, but I tried to take the concerns that people have about cannabis seriously and present to them the information that they need in order to allay those concerns. Because, you know, it's very tempting for those of us who know this plant very well to ourselves become intolerant, to ourselves become angry, to ourselves become so frustrated with people who just don't see the truth when we work so hard and so much to bring it to them, right? And what we have to understand is that people have been lied to, have been given disinformation by the sources that they should be able to trust the most for their entire lifetimes, and in some cases over the course of multiple generations of lifetimes. So we have to be compassionate and understand that when people have been lied to so massively for so long, by so many institutions, by educational institutions, by the media, by the government, by even their own parents, right? That it's a big task. And so we just have to take those concerns as seriously as we can and address them in as compassionate and reasonable a tone as we can build in our hearts.
That's so great, Steve. So thank you for writing this book for the first time. It's not enough to say it's been a reference for me in all these years of activism, but also knowing myself better, knowing my own consumption, and knowing where I'm standing on in the timeline of history and where to move to. And I thank you personally so much for that. It helped me a lot, and I hope it helps a lot more people now that is in Portuguese for the first time, and it's able to be read all over Brazil by people that only read Portuguese, which is the language in Brazil. So let's take advantage of that and inform ourselves, educate ourselves to be able to live better and be able to relate better with the plant and with the people that are up against and also alongside us, and be able to live well, which is the lesson. I think it's the more important on this book. So I wanted to personally thank you so much as well, Steve, for participating in this program. We've been talking a lot about different subjects that relate to cannabis and are so important for us. And I thank you so much for this time and for your trajectory and your time being. And we'd love to receive you in Brazil sometime real soon, I hope. Anybody out there, making events, making stuff in Brazil, are able to be in touch and receive lessons in person from Steve. I think that's great. Let's take some advantage of that and invite Steve over to Brazil, please. If Sou Cannabis is not doing that, let's get together a lot of people and get Steve down there in Brazil. There's a lot of things we can learn about him, and also a lot of things we didn't have time to talk about here. All the nowadays scenario, the contemporary scenario, the industry scenario, so important. But you can read it in the book, and you can find Steve in the internet and his lectures. Follow him in Facebook and Instagram. Steve's always putting out these inspiring speeches and reflections on our practices around the cannabis plant and other visionary plants as well, right? So thank you so much, Steve. Microphone is open if you want to pass some messages to Brazilian people right now. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nico. Brazil is the first place outside of North America that my book is being published. Portuguese is the first language. And I think it's really fitting. I'm really excited. Brazil was the first place that cannabis landed in the Americas. And it was from Brazil that cannabis spread up to Colombia and eventually throughout the rest of the Americas. And so, I hope that the same thing happens to my book, that it takes root in Brazil, that it spreads throughout the rest of the Americas. I'm working on the follow-up book to that right now, which is called The Cannabis Creed, which talks more about the sacramental and spiritual history of this plant. And that history runs very, very deep in Brazil. So not only do I look forward to coming to Brazil to teach what I've learned about the plant, but I also look forward to coming to Brazil to learn what Brazilians have to teach me about the plant, and so that I can then take that knowledge to the rest of our tribe around the world. Today, there are hundreds of millions of us who love this plant around the world. Collectively, we're as large or larger than all but the largest nations. We're beginning to wake up to that now. We're beginning to introduce ourselves to each other. We're beginning to claim some of the power that we really have. And once we learn how to talk to each other fully and to move as the one community that we are, we're going to see some tremendous changes happen in this world. So I look forward to coming to Brazil and furthering that process.
One love.
One love.
One cause. One tribe.
One tribe, brother. Be well.
Muito obrigado a todos vocês aí vendo esse conteúdo. Muito obrigado. Se vocês gostaram, compartilhem, ponham a palavra adiante. Essa é uma missão nossa, de todos nós. E vamos, bola para frente. compartilha esse conteúdo, compra o livro, indica esse livro. Eu realmente não posso terminar de dizer o que tão importante esse livro foi e está sendo na minha vida, e a oportunidade de ter ele aí no Brasil para todo mundo ver é uma oportunidade tremenda. Vai estar sendo distribuído pela Sou Cannabis e também por outros meios de divulgação oficial. Vocês podem perguntar e fiquem à vontade. Vejam os blocos dessa entrevista e fiquem bem. Eu sou o Pedro Mota, Nico Malas Artes, aí também no Instagram, a serviço de vocês. Valeu, galera. Tudo de bom. Falou.